So I came by this video where the president of the Socialist Party of Zambia, Dr. Fred Membe, was having a political conversation with a particular Chinese man. Just to be clear, I don't know what this man's name is. I don't even know if he's a politician. So I'm not calling him a Chinese man to be disrespectful or anything. I just want to make that clear. The clip I have, maybe it was cut or something, but the portion of what I have don't have his name stated on it. So yeah, I just want to be clear on that. Like, no disrespect whatsoever to this man. It's quite an interesting conversation they were having. So I thought, why don't I bring the video on here as well so we can look at the video together. Plus, I really want to know what you guys think of the conversation that they had. I would be sharing my thoughts at intervals. Because it's a long conversation, I won't be interjecting too much because I do not want to disrupt the flow in the conversation that they're having. So without further ado, let's roll the clip.
If you look at for example, the coverage of China in the Western press or in remarks by Western officials, in particular US officials, they often refer to China as the biggest, or top challenge or biggest threat to the US existence. How do you understand that kind of allegation or criticism?
You can understand why they are worried about like a country like China, because China is working in the opposite direction to them. China is working to free other people and free itself from being plundered, from being humiliated.
Quick question, please. Do you guys think that China is doing all that she is doing because she actually cares about liberating other people? Because I don't. Now, China is working and fighting hard to liberate herself and her people, and I do not fault her for that. She is doing what she needs to do for the survival, liberation, and progress of herself and her people. But what are we doing for the survival, liberation, progress of Africa and Africa's people? China doesn't care about us and our freedom. China isn't up at night, can't sleep, worried because she's thinking about how can I free those Africans. The only thing China cares about when it comes to the continent of Africa is our resources. That's all she cares about. The sooner we understand this, the better for us all. Constantly waiting for someone to come save us. Nobody is coming. This Messiah syndrome, I've been a Messiah condition that we are suffering from. We've got to find a cure for it because my goodness. So let's stop being delusional thinking China is working towards freeing other people. She really isn't. China cares about no one but China. And it's about time we too start making ourselves our priority and start caring about no one but ourselves. And just like China is doing, we need to start working towards freeing ourselves. Not waiting here for someone to add us to the agenda. No one is ever going to do that. None of them send us or our papa. Nobody have our time. The sooner we get this, the better for us all.
This is the country that the USA is a country that has thrived, survived, prospered from slave trade, cross-Atlantic slave trade. They enslaved the Africans for centuries. They plundered the resources of Latin America, the resources of Africa, the resources of Asia. They plundered even the resources of Europe. This is the country, if plunder today, exploitation of other people is removed, the USA will not be the powerful country that it is today. If there is equality in the dealings with each other, the USA ceases because it doesn't know how to deal with other people on an equal basis, with other nations on an equal basis. It gets lost. It's worried today with the multipolar world that is emerging because its hegemonic interests are being threatened. It's not China per se. It's the interests of the Americans that are being threatened with a world that is more equal, that is more fair, that is more just. They can't survive in that world because their methods of existence are based on plundering other nations, on humiliating other nations, on exploiting other nations.
The US has almost 800 military bases around the world. That is an insane amount, man. To put it in perspective for you, there are 195 countries in this world, and the US has almost 800 bases, military bases around the world. They will tell you that they have military bases in people's countries because they are keeping the peace. But that's far from the truth, because what they are actually doing in these countries is they are causing mayhem, distraction, and destruction. because they only profit when there is no peace. Military bases stretched out everywhere, constantly having their nose in everybody's business. So they need to be on ground in your country so they can monitor you. Look at what they are doing right now in Sudan. They are pissed because they could not have a military base there. So they decided to start problem. I made a video on this. If you want to check it out, it's linked down below in the description. But of course, let them tell it and you would hear how they are the ones keeping global peace.
Well, a related question, I would cite is, the Chinese efforts to broker, basically a peace deal for Saudi Arabia and Iran to resume their diplomatic ties. And then you see the Chinese efforts to create some conditions for peace or for ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine in this Ukraine crisis. But then if you look at the reaction or response from the US side, they try to dismiss the Chinese efforts or belittle the Chinese efforts as something else. Why is that kind of response? The Chinese efforts basically have been welcomed by the rest of the world. People see that as very positive. More peace, more stability in the Middle East, more reconciliation. What's wrong with that?
A world that is peaceful is not suitable for the United States because it prospers from conflict. It sets one humble nation against the other. It does not help to remove conflicts. It always creates conflicts. When you look at the conflicts that have existed in the world since 1776, when the USA was formed, the USA usually has a hand in it. When it doesn't have a hand in it, it doesn't work to resolve those conflicts. It works to perpetuate those conflicts because it thrives from conflict. It benefits from conflicts. When the world is divided, it becomes easier to exploit. It becomes easier to plunder. A united people cannot be plundered. A united people cannot be exploited. A united people cannot be made to fight each other and prosper. This is the country that benefits from wars. It prospers from wars. It creates wars as a business to make profits from. It makes profits from wars.
Well, the famous example is the military-industrial complex in the U.S. They certainly welcome conflicts and wars so they can, sell weapons, ammunitions, and make a profit out of that.
Yes, and they are also linked to the media. They are linked to the politics. They are the sponsors of the politicians. So they have to find conflict all the time. If no conflict arises naturally, they create it so that their industries make more and more money.
And every year the U.S. publish, human rights record on every country but itself. What do you make of that? Some people accuse the U.S. of using the so-called human rights to interfere in the internal affairs of other countries, in particular the countries they are not happy with or they see as rivals. What do you make of that?
The pious arm of human rights that the USA waves all the time is hypocritical. This is the country that has invaded other countries, killing so many people, including children. This is the country that has appropriated the resources of other countries, leaving those countries helpless. Look at Iraq today.
20th anniversary of...
20th anniversary. What is happening to the Iraqi oil money? When Iraq sells oil, all the money goes to the USA. It's the USA government that decides how much to give to the Iraqi government to use. The Iraqi government has to submit a budget to the USA to get its own money after 20 years of that conflict. Is Iraq independent? Is Iraq sovereign? Iraq today is a colony of the USA. This is the country that occupies other countries' territories. For how long have they been in Guantanamo, on Cuban soil? A small island, the whole country of the USA, a huge territory, they still go and grab a small territory, not very far away from its own country, from its own coast. They have been occupying it for how many years?
Several decades.
The Cubans have been crying, give us our land. The USA does not respect the territory. Can really the USA claim Guantanamo to be their territory?
Right.
You can understand the same behavior in Taiwan. Same behavior. If today China or Russia went and did the same in Hawaii, what the USA is doing with Taiwan, would the USA accept it? They say, do unto others as you would like them to do unto you. Does the USA do unto others as it would like them to do on itself?
This is an interesting perspective of the point here. You mentioned about the equality among sovereign nations. That's an exercise of democracy, based on equal footing and expressing one's wish or one's needs or demands equally in the international community. Do you think there's enough democracy in terms of that respect?
If you don't respect the territories of other people, those territories are occupied by human beings. How can you respect human beings when you don't respect the territories which they occupy? How can you respect a human being when you don't respect the privacy of their home, the dignity of their home? A homeland is something very important to any human being. Every human being on this planet has a homeland. The homeland is their house, it's their home. That's why it's called homeland. You don't just get into somebody's house. You don't just get into somebody's country and interfere. If you don't respect the sovereignty of a territory, you cannot respect the human being who lives in that territory. You cannot claim to be committed to their democratic rights. You cannot claim to be committed to their human rights. What are human rights without a homeland? What are human rights or democracy without sovereignty? When your rights can be trampled on, when your leaders can be toppled anytime, when your leaders can be killed anytime. Look at what they did to Saddam Hussein. Look what they did to Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Look at what they do to other people's leaders. Look even at the attitude, the arrogance towards other people. They never respect the leaders of other countries.
Now, this was a very nice, interesting conversation they had here. But still, let us not forget that we as a people need to stay at alert at all times. Now we are agreeing with each other because we have like a common enemy, so we are uniting on that front. But let us not lose focus. Let us not be swayed or be deceived into thinking even for a second that anybody would have our back like we would have our own backs. We have to know at all times when we are dealing with people that everybody is working towards protecting their own and making sure that theirs is settled. So let us not get distracted and forget that we need to be doing the same as well. That's all I'm saying. But guys, what are your thoughts? Let's continue this conversation down below in the comment section. And of course, as always, I'll see you guys in the next one.